How you do, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. Everybody all right? Folks, I think this is a new era in jazz with a new breed of jazz musician. This is a guy who can play with jazz legends like Stanley Clarke and Gerald Wilson and play with R&B legends like Chaka Khan, hip-hop folks like Snoop Dogg, and we can't forget Kendrick Lamar and Flying Lotus, okay? How do you mix all those genres as a sax player, as a jazz saxophone player?
Well, I've always felt they're connected. So for me, it wasn't much of a stretch because that's who I was. That's what I listened to. You know, my world encompassed all those styles of music and all those people. So I was just kind of being myself, and like that kind of led me to those places. I didn't have to really push. I was already kind of there, you know.
I've always said jazz is a sponge. It takes its time and absorbs the music of its time and spits it back out. So you were a hip hopper somewhat when you were young, listening to that music as well?
Yeah, I grew up listening to hip hop. My dad's a musician, so I grew up also listening to jazz. So they were kind of simultaneously in my life. And then, you know, like a lot of the hip hop songs that I liked, I knew the jazz records that they sampled from. And then, you know, from my perspective as a kid, you know, like even like funk, it felt like jazz. It was the same thing to me. It was just a different word. You know, it was same music but two different words. Yeah. So like when you know when Snoop and Dre came out with that whole G-funk sound, it was like, oh yeah, this is right up my alley.
As a jazz saxophonist, how did you start?
Well, I've been playing music since I was 3. So I started off on drums, and then I switched to piano. And then when I really got into music, I wanted to play saxophone, but my dad wouldn't let me. He's a saxophone player as well. And back in the 70s, if you played saxophone, you had to play flute and clarinet as well. And they're a little harder than saxophone. So I was playing clarinet, but I secretly really wanted to play saxophone. And one day he left his saxophone out at the rehearsal at a rehearsal he had at our house. And I was just like, man, I'm playing the saxophone today. I'm doing it. And then like I just grabbed it. And I figured out how to play this song that I really liked when I was a kid called Sleeping to Answer Sleep On. It's a Wayne Shorter song. Happy birthday, Wayne.
Happy birthday, Wayne Shorter. Everybody, happy birthday, Wayne Shorter, okay?
Yeah, so I figured out how to play that song and like at that day, and my dad, like, he almost didn't believe me. I was like, I can already play the saxophone, so it's too late. So he took me serious at that point, and that changed my whole direction.
Man, you come from an amazing neighborhood. I saw Ronald Bruner play with Stanley Clarke and Hiromi, one of the best shows I ever seen. And then I saw this bass player, Thundercat, found out he was Ronald Bruner's brother. And Thundercat is an amazing musician. And you guys all grew up together, is that true?
Yeah. Thundercat and Ronald's dad played with my dad. So I met Ronald when Thundercat was an infant. But on my 3rd birthday party, Ronald's about a year and a half younger than me, I got a drum set. And so I was happy. I got my drum set, and everybody was talking about this baby at the party that could play the drums. And apparently, I don't fully remember it, but the story is that I didn't want the baby playing my drums because I was a 3-year-old, so I was a kid. These are kid drums, not baby drums. And and apparently, I guess he got on the drums and was a little better than me, and I didn't like it. So maybe that's why I ended up on saxophone, really.
And he's one of the baddest drummers out there, right?
Oh yeah. He came out of the womb playing drums for sure.
And you've been involved with music all your life?
Yeah, all my whole life. You know, my dad's a musician, so in my family it was almost like a prerequisite. You know, it wasn't even a choice. You know, we all played music, all my brothers and sisters, and yeah.
Now you have one of the hottest records in the country, jazz records right now, in The Epic. What a great epic picture. But when you were young, you did an album in high school, is that right?
Yeah, myself, Ronald Bruner, Thundercat, and Cameron Graves, we had a group called the Young Jazz Giants. And we got that name on our first gig, actually. The group started, we did the John Coltrane competition, and we won it. And a writer, you know, in the paper called us a bunch of young jazz giants, and that's where it kind of stuck.
Okay, see, I know this. Tell the folks about that John Coltrane competition when you were very young, who you met that day.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. I've had this circle in my life. Like everybody that's in my band, we all grew up together since we were kids. And at that first gig, our first gig of our first band, of anybody, of this circle of musicians that we all grew up together with, we won the John Coltrane competition, and Robbie Coltrane came to give the award, and he brought Flying Lotus with him, a young Stephen Ellis, and that's where we met. He was like a little kid. We didn't really put two and two together until years and years later. But it was an ironic thing that we met at that.
Well, kind of how did you guys put two and two together? Because that Flying Lotus record is like nothing folks have ever heard before.
Yeah, Flying Lotus, he started working with Thundercat. And then I randomly ran into him at a jam session. And he came and sat in at the jam session. He brought his whole little rig, and we played together. And then, we realized that we both knew Steven. And then I think actually Ronald was the one that remembered that he was there that day. And then he was like, oh, yeah, that's right, I was there that day,
Wow, and what a great record, again, Flying Lotus. And another hot record you're a part of, before we talk about the epic, is Kendrick Lamar. How did that partnership happen?
Well, I have a friend named Terrace Martin, great saxophone player, another guy we grew up with. I grew up with as a kid. And I was working on Terrace's record. He has a record coming out called Velvet Portraits. And I let him hear the epic. He had heard about it. We hadn't put it out yet, but he heard about it. And when he heard the strings and choir, his eyes lighted up, and he was like, man, I had something I need you to work on with Kendrick. So I went into the studio. It was real secretive, like in this building with no name on it, and you had to show your ID to get in, and it was I thought it was meeting the president or something. I was like, is Obama in here recording? So Kendrick, came out, and they showed me the original song they wanted me to do. They wanted me to kind of do a score to that final skit that Kendrick has where he's interviewing Tupac. So they played that for me, and I was kind of freaked out. I was like, is Tupac alive? Is he in the studio somewhere? Because that was the timing on that was so amazing, right? And but to get the full scope of what that skit and that poem and that interview really meant, they wanted to play me the whole album. So they played the whole album for me, and I was just blown away by the work that Terrace and Thundercat and Flying Lotus and Taz and all these other great musicians did. And I was just like, wow, it was a very powerful album. And every time they played the album for me, they found a new song they want me to write something for. So it was a blessing. I felt blessed to be a part of something that was that special,
Yes, it's very special. But so is the epic. And from what I understand, this amazing 3 CD set came about because you were playing with so many folks and you just had to lock it down and get it together. Tell folks the story about how that record was made.
Well, in 2010, Lotus asked me to make a record for Brain Feeder. And my first thought was, oh man, I had to record this core of musicians that I grew up with. Because we've all played a lot together, and we played with a lot of different people together, but we never really recorded ourselves at a high level. So I started calling on musicians to see who was down to record with me. And basically everybody that I called was like, man, I got some music I need to record as well. So myself, Miles Mosley, and Tony Austin kind of got together and organized, us basically locking ourselves away for a whole month in December of 2011. So we canceled all of our gigs and just went in there. We had a little music sweatshop. We were making music from 10 in the morning till 2 in the morning every day. It was intense, but it was beautiful at the same time because it was I never got to stretch my creative wings as far as I did during that month of December.
And what was the result? Not only the epic, but there's more to come. Is that right?
Yeah, there are 8 more albums on the way out. Miles Mosley, Ronald Bruner Jr., Brandon Coleman, Cameron Graves, Ryan Porter, Treese Quinn, Tony Austin. They all have records that are coming out pretty soon.
And 3 CDs. I mean, in this time of bad jazz economics, was there some trepidation in putting out a 3 CD set?
I have to tell you, I mean, it was a little scary, but it kind of happened almost by chance. By the time we finished that whole month of recording, we had like 190 songs, 3 terabytes of music. I had 45 songs just for my project. So like it was like this mass of music that I had to wrap my mind around. And to reduce the songs, I basically chose 17 to try to make the album out of. I was trying to make one disc. I really was trying. And I was trying to decide which songs were going to be on the album by seeing which songs the string and choir concept worked on. So I started writing to the first song, Change of the Guard, and I started having this reoccurring dream. And it was like a crazy dream. I don't even really dream like that. So like in that process, I kind of got almost obsessed with like getting this story written down. And like over the course of like working on the music, the story kind of felt like it encompassed all the songs that are on the album. So by the time I finished all the string stuff, I was like, man, I had this crazy story. And I was like, this is one thing. Like if I break up the album, I'm going to mess up the story. And that's actually that's how I got the name The Epic, because the reason why the album is what it is because of that story that kind of went along with it. And so
Well, your bet proved right. It's one of the best-selling jazz records of 2015. Congratulations on that, man.
Thank you.
I find so many things about your story so amazing. Let's talk about, I think it was May 4th in L.A. at a place called the Regent Theater. It was a Monday night. You did a gig with how many musicians was it?
35.
And you sold out 1,400 people. What is it about getting large groups together, and how do you find your sound when you have such a large group?
Well, it's part of my personality, I think. I like mixing things together, and even my name means like peace bringer. It means like someone who brings people together. So I'm constantly, I don't know, it's hard for me to like leave something alone. It's like, oh, that's a chair. That chair will be good with a little fan on it. You know what I mean? Oh, you have a step. Why don't we put a rail on the steps? I don't know. So when it came down to do the Regent show, I already had a band, 10-piece band of, some of the most amazing musicians in the world. And I knew I wanted to have the string and choir component that I had in the record. But for some reason, I wanted to add a DJ element because during the Regent show, I told a large portion of that story that kind of the album was inspired by, and so I wanted to have these DJs kind of like help me in that, and like kind of almost like recreating the imagery of the story, but from a musical perspective. So that's where like it got really heavy, and everybody's like, "Kamasi, why are you adding more stuff to this?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know."
Well, again, your bet proved right because all those folks showed up, and it's a great show on the internet, folks. If you get to see that on the brainfeeder.com site.
Yeah, NPR did it. So
who did it?
NPR.
Wow. Yeah, very, very nice. You can't travel with all those folks. You have a big European tour happening, some dates in the U.S. How many folks are you traveling with?
I'm traveling with a 7-piece, sometimes 8-piece band, which is basically the core of the musicians that did the sessions. And it's cool because like I give people like, when I had the full, 35, 40-piece, 50, 60, whatever piece orchestra band, you don't get as much of each individual person, and they're all so brilliant, so it's cool. Like these shows with a smaller band, people are kind of like getting a more up close, personal, kind of like intimate like view of each person and like all the different nuances that each person has to bring.
Kamasi Washington, he's amazing, ladies and gentlemen. You're playing tonight the Blue Note.
Yeah.
Last night you had some surprises, right? At the Blue Note. Who showed up?
Terrace Martin, great producer, great alto saxophone player, and Thundercat also showed up, and Igmar Thomas, great trumpet player from San Diego who lives in New York, and I had my dad come up and play some songs, so it was a cool night.
And what's your dad's name?
Ricky Washington.
And he's been part of the LA jazz scene for a long time.
Yeah, his whole life. That song, Change of the Guard, I actually wrote for my dad and his friends because they were all so brilliant. I remember being a kid and just like not knowing why they weren't famous because they were so good. And I was like, wow,
It's hard being a musician. You have to appreciate everything you accomplish. Okay?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's beautiful and it's difficult. It's as a musician we work, but you love what you work. You love what you do so much it doesn't feel like work. So it's a gift.
I know in October, a vinyl version of the Epic is coming out. Anything else in the future you'd like to tell the audience about?
Yeah. The vinyl's coming out on October 2nd. I'm actually working on writing out that story that the album is inspired by. It's kind of scattered all over my house. There's parts are written on little pieces of paper and on top of music, and it's just kind of I'm a bit scatterbrained like that.
Before you perform, one question I have to ask. As a college student, UCLA, why ethnomusicology? Why'd you get a degree there?
I chose ethnomusicology because I was so serious in high school and leading up to going to college. I pretty much had a pretty good regiment of Western music. So when I saw ethnomusicology, I looked at it as something that I really didn't know anything about. So I was going to be learning about musical styles and theories and approaches that I really had no idea about. And to me, school is all about learning. It's not about getting a degree. So when I saw ethnomusicology, it was what do you do with an ethnomusicology degree? You learn something with it. So that's why I looked at it as an opportunity to learn something. So
did it help you with your music career?
Absolutely,
In what way?
absolutely. Well, it exposed me to music that I wouldn't have been exposed to, otherwise, and stuff like Indonesian gamelan music, which has had a huge impact on the way I write music, and North Indian classical music, and Mbira music from Zimbabwe, and just a lot of stuff that's has had a huge impact on the way I write and the way I play. I wouldn't have had that without that, that background.
A new generation of jazz musicians, ladies and gentlemen, Kamasi Washington.